The UK and France seem further away than ever tonight from a solution to the cross-channel humanitarian disaster that's led to the deaths of 27 people this week. One of those was named today, a 24-year-old Kurdish student from Iraq, Mariam Nouri Mohammed Amin, who was trying to join her fiancé in Britain. But as faces begin to be put to the victims who perished, the Franco-British blame game intensified. The Elysée took umbrage at the publication on social media by the Prime Minister of a letter detailing a plan to deal with the crisis and rescinded an invitation to the Home Secretary Priti Patel to attend talks with European Home Ministers in Calais on Sunday. Here's our policy editor Lewis Goodall at the makeshift Grand Synth camp near Dunkirk.
Nearly every beach on the Opal coast of northeast France is a potential launching site. Hundreds of kilometres, dune after dune, beach after beach, launching boat after boat. It makes the chance of stopping every boat all but impossible, the French say. How they might overcome those odds is now central to the discussion between Britain and France of preventing further catastrophe. And yet, so soon after one of the worst disasters in our common and long history, the urgency already seems lost.
This story has already ascended to the realms of high politics and the cliched ways that we always talk about high politics. There's been a row, a diplomatic rift, probably at some point followed by the inevitable rapprochement. But until such time as we reach that rapprochement, we have gone no further forward. Indeed, arguably, we've gone backwards because whatever trust there was between the two sides has now evaporated. So now we have no joint plan, and all of the people who are still in those camps will keep doing what they've been doing. They will come back to these beaches as soon as the weather clears and do what they've done before, which is go into the waves. And the very real risk is that this sorry and tragic story simply happens all over again.
There is nowhere from which that politics feels more distant than the people about whom it is supposed to address. The camp at Grand Synth was where at least some of those who died started that fateful journey in the early hours of Wednesday. One of the many grim realities of this place is that some here still won't know for sure whether their friends or relatives were among their number.
I mean, there are people here who are trying to locate their brothers, their friends, and don't know whether they have just been relocated, whether they are simply staying in a different location, or whether they might have been on that boat.
Emmanuel Macron has talked about, a national day of mourning. What do you think about that?
I mean, as a humanitarian aid worker working here, I find it insulting. I find it disrespectful that being one of the people that puts these policies in place, being one of the people that allows the French authorities to come in and treat these people in the way they do, to then try and sort of pay some respects to it. I think it's quite shameless, and really I find it all quite disgusting, actually.
There's something else at Grand Synth, something amid all the tragedy and the cold you might not expect, but which you need to understand to realise why the journeys endure. It's hope. There are many here who have lost everything, but you walk through, they smile, they offer you their last cup of tea, their own chair around the fire. That hope is a thing which makes them rebuild, even though the police may come and tear it all down again tomorrow, and why they'll try, yet again, to cross the sea. But sometimes they do so as they're being lied to by the gangs who brought them here.
Most of them, they believe that what is the gangster told them. There's no scary, there's no way to you die. There are policemen that they came if you have any problem with the boat or anything that make you die, the police will arrive.
Well, I suppose you've taken a lot of risks just to get here.
Yes.
Already?
More than this water is risky, more than this water,
If there was a way for you to apply for asylum in Britain, from here, would you do that?
Yes, of course. That's better for me, for everyone. If there any chance to go to UK freely, legally, without any problems like drowning or going to the water, everyone do this.
When we first came here a few days ago, before the tragedy, it was after the police dispersal of the other camp up the road, and this place was just, a smattering of tents, a few score of people, and it was, very basic. Now it has grown in just a few days. It's gone all the way up the road, all the way around the corner, under the bridge, and you've got loads and loads of tents, now hundreds of people, an infrastructure starting to develop. And because they're all hoping that maybe after what's happened, the French police will leave them alone for a bit. But of course, if they do that, then this camp is just going to grow, and it's going to grow, and it's going to grow, because people are coming even now, not least because people have told us here that quite a few of the traffickers have either been arrested or fled, which means that the potential for new crossings might be limited for a little while, and then that means that, of course, more people will just come here and have to stay here.
Something else people say a lot here is that their fates are in the hands of God. But really, they're in the gift of London and Paris. And right now, since they have so little to say, even to each other, the truth is that these people are on their own.
Lewis Goodall there on the French side of the channel. I'm now joined by Fabienne Keller, a French MEP who works on asylum and migration issues with the Committee on Civil Liberties, Justice and Home Affairs in the European Parliament. Thanks for joining us. Someone's got to be the adult in the room with this type of humanitarian crisis. You just have to talk to the British government, don't you, and not be rescinding invitations to the Home Secretary?
We have to cooperate much better. And the letter that was sent yesterday night by the British Prime Minister was not sent in a fair and a correct manner, because it was not a constructive letter. It was immediately on the Twitter account of the Prime Minister and in the newspapers on the next morning. That means it was not a basis for discussion and cooperation. It was more a political address. And this is not a good basis to make progress together in this dramatic situation we face in the Channel today.
But, I mean, this is politics. Those things happen. There's a genuine, real crisis, as we've just seen from our reports, from squalid conditions on your territory, and these boats are leaving from French beaches. Don't you, even if you believe that the Prime Minister of the UK is playing games here, isn't it incumbent upon you to talk to key British government officials?
Of course, this was planned. As you know, the British Minister Priti Patel was supposed to participate to a discussion with Germany, Belgium, France, and the Netherlands, and himself, all the European countries at the border of the Channel. But due to that letter, that was very brutal and not constructive, as I said, it was proposed for him not to participate because it was not an amicable and positive gesture. We just lived a tragedy altogether. It's a terrible situation.
Well, it's difficult to see how you get to
Unfortunately, we have been living this situation for years, as you know, around 20 years. But it's difficult to believe today, but the number of people crossing is lower this year than for 10 or 20 years, even though the migrants are taking more dangerous routes as controls get stronger and stronger on the French side.
OK, so from your perspective, the camps are smaller, the crossings are smaller, but they're more dangerous, OK? But what the letter seemed to reveal was that privately, President Macron had said to the Prime Minister that under the French EU presidency that starts in January, he, unlike what we have heard for months and months, is willing to concede some sort of deal on return of illegal immigrants from the UK back to the European Union, that he's willing to negotiate that as a priority for the EU presidency.
I'm sorry, I was not there in this discussion. I don't know who explained what was said during this private discussion. What I know is that the migrants in Calais are expecting to go to Great Britain. This is why they stay there. We have many more migrants all over Europe, in France and Germany. Last year in France, we had 90,000 people asking for asylum. So we have a lot of migrants, but those ones staying in Calais usually have families in Great Britain or speak well English or are of British culture and want to go to Great Britain. This is their objective, and we must. There is no simple situation.
Okay, just
solution.
Quickly, some French presidential candidates like Michel Barnier are suggesting that the Touquet Treaty, where the UK polices France polices the UK border, that could be ripped up. Is that plausible?
This is, I think, not the idea of the existing French government. As you know, Mr. Barnier is in an internal campaign in his political party. I think the only way to progress in this very difficult, dramatic, and human situation is to cooperate between Great Britain and France. And unfortunately,
we must leave that there. But thank you very much for joining us, Madame Keller, from France. There. So this week, the UK asylum system has been blamed for the situation, with the Home Secretary herself saying the only solution is wholesale reform of the system. So how much of it is down to long waits on asylum claims? Ben Chew is at the wall for us.
Yes, Faisal, one thing seemingly everyone agrees on in the asylum debate is that the UK's domestic system for processing claims is broken. And new figures this week underline that, with the Home Office revealing that at the end of September, there were 67,547 cases still awaiting an initial decision. That's the highest on record. And of those cases, some 44,000, around two-thirds, have been waiting more than 6 months. Countries such as France and Germany seem to be much more efficient in processing claims. The Refugee Council points out that the average waiting time for initial asylum decision in Germany last year was 8 months. By comparison, the average waiting time in the UK is likely to be somewhere between 1 and 3 years. Now, refugee charities say such long waits are inhumane on the asylum seekers whose lives are in limbo. Other critics suggest the long backlogs encourage people to choose to try to come to the UK over other countries, giving them hope that they will not be deported for years and will, in the end, likely be able to stay. So why is there such a long backlog of unprocessed claims in the UK? Is austerity the culprit? The Home Office, like most of the rest of Whitehall, did experience budget cuts over the past decade. Yet, as this chart shows, the number of asylum caseworkers has actually risen over that period to just under 600. The problem is that their productivity, the number of claims each is getting through, has fallen. Yet there is some circumstantial evidence that a lack of resources is a contributory factor to the backlog. A report this month by the Independent Chief Inspector of Border and Immigration pointed to low morale among caseworkers and outdated computer systems. And there's also evidence of high staff turnover, which could be harming productivity. Now, experts say we can't be sure what's going on and argue the Home Office has not tried hard enough to find out the cause, which is perhaps surprising given the rhetoric of ministers over the inefficiencies of the system and the fact that the cost to the public purse of the high backlog has been estimated at £220 million a year, though the Home Office says it does now plan to hire more caseworkers. Yet we should also add that there's little evidence the UK's large backlog of unprocessed cases, harmful though it is for those caught up in the system, is constituting much of a pull factor for people to choose to claim asylum in the UK rather than in other European countries. Research into claimants has suggested factors such as family ties and language are the dominant factors in where people claim asylum, rather than any detailed knowledge of a nation's asylum bureaucracy. So there's a strong case that sorting out our inefficient asylum processing system should be a priority. Yet we probably shouldn't expect achieving that to have much impact on the numbers entering the system in the first place. Numbers that are, as we've been emphasising all week on Newsnight, lower than the numbers claiming asylum in many of our large European neighbours. Faisal.
Well, that's all we've got time for tonight.